There are moments in British history that feel almost impossible when viewed through today's eyes, and yet, only a single lifetime ago, they were completely ordinary. The 1960 seconds was a decade defined by freedom, not just political or cultural freedom, but everyday freedom, personal freedom, childhood freedom, the kind of freedom that would make modern Britain gasp in disbelief. In 1964, long before safeguarding laws, GPS trackers, and laminated policy documents, a 5-year-old child tying their shoes, pulling on a coat, and walking themselves to school wasn't considered unusual, it was expected. A generation grew up navigating their own neighbourhoods from the moment they could cross a road. They learned confidence the old-fashioned way, on their feet, out in the world, without an adult hovering behind them. Entire families spent summer Saturdays at the seaside without a single thought about supervision, sunscreen, or designated safe zones. Children disappeared for hours on end, reappearing at tea time with sandy feet, salt in their hair, and stories that sounded like small adventures. Nobody checked the clock, nobody panicked. Freedom was simply part of life. Britain, in the 1960 seconds, was built on trust. Trust in neighbours, trust in strangers, trust in children, and that trust shaped a society very different from the one we know today. 10. Motorbikes' freedom without fear. If there's one symbol that captures the raw spirit of 1960 seconds Britain, it's the motorbike. Sleek, loud, rebellious, and ridden almost entirely without helmets. Helmets existed, yes, but to many riders they represented fear, fuss, and a certain seriousness that didn't belong on two wheels. You wore a leather jacket, you wore your pride, and you wore the wind in your hair, but a helmet? That was for someone else. Young men roared through town centres, leaning into corners with nothing between themselves and the tarmac but nerve and skill. It wasn't just transport, it was identity. The mods with their scooters and mirrors, the rockers with their stripped-down cafe racers, the entire youth culture crackled with a confidence that sped far ahead of the rules. Ask anyone who rode during that era, and you'll hear the same description. The feeling of being alive. No visor, no chin strap, just the world rushing past, fast and bright and slightly dangerous. Then came 1973. Helmet laws arrived, the romance remained, but the freedom changed. Roads became safer, but something in the spirit of riding that pure, unfiltered thrill faded into memory. 9. Childhood independence, growing up by doing. Children of the 1960 seconds lived lives that would today spark emergency meetings in school, staff rooms, and worried calls to social services. From the age of 7 or 8, children walked themselves to school, crossed busy roads alone, explored their neighbourhoods freely, and stayed home without an adult, while their parents went out. This wasn't neglect, this was training for life. The oldest child became in charge for the evening, a responsibility that today would require a certificate, a risk assessment, and 3 DBS checks. But back then, it built competence. Children made their own tea, often beans on toast or fish fingers, settled arguments on their own, put themselves to bed, and handled small emergencies with surprising maturity. Parents trusted their children, and crucially, children rose to meet that trust. Behind it all was the invisible safety net of the community. The neighbour next door, the one across the road, the one peering through lace curtains, they all kept a quiet, unspoken watch. A child was never truly alone. They were part of a collective that cared. Modern laws offer vital protections, but many from that generation will tell you their independence wasn't dangerous, it was empowering. 8. Real science discovery with real risks. Chemistry sets of the 1960 seconds were not toys. They were portals to another world. They came packed with real acids, metal salts, magnesium ribbon, and enough reactive materials to make today's safety inspectors faint. Children learned science by doing it, and occasionally by singeing their eyebrows while doing it. They mixed chemicals, heated substances in test tubes, created small explosions, and watched colours change with awe and curiosity. Most unforgettable of all was the mercury. When a thermometer broke, children gathered the silvery droplets in their hands, rolling the metal spheres across their palms as if they were tiny treasures. Toxic? Yes. Fascinating? Absolutely. For many scientists, engineers, and researchers, these early experiences were life-changing. They sparked careers, built fascination, and showed that the world was full of materials worth understanding, not fearing. Today's chemistry sets are safe, wonderfully safe, but they're also limited. They teach theory, not the thrill of discovery. The pendulum has swung toward protection, but with it, something essential about childhood curiosity has slipped quietly away. 7. Free-roaming dogs, a different kind of pet ownership. If you grew up in 1960 seconds Britain, you will remember the neighbourhood dogs. They were not confined to gardens or tethered to leads. They wandered streets with the confidence of locals, visiting favourite houses, tailing children to school, and patrolling their unofficial territories. Every street had its dog characters: the terrier who loitered outside the butcher's for scraps, the collie who acted like a self-appointed crossing guard, the friendly spaniel who joined any family on their walk, whether invited or not. These dogs lived semi-independent lives. They had owners, of course, but they also had freedom. They socialized with other dogs, explored, trotted in and out of neighbors' gardens, and were known by everyone. They weren't viewed as potential threats or liabilities. They were part of the community. Modern laws insist on identification tags, leads, microchips, and strict control. Accidents and dangers have been greatly reduced, but an entire relationship between neighborhoods, families, and dogs has vanished. People still love their dogs, perhaps more than ever, but the dogs of today live far more sheltered lives than their free-spirited 1960 seconds counterparts. 6. Pubs, pints, and personal judgment. In the 1960 seconds, the local pub wasn't merely a place for a drink, it was the heartbeat of the community. Deals were made over pints, friendships formed in the warm, smoke-filled air. The evening pint or two, or three before driving home, was not seen as reckless, it was simply normal behaviour. Long before breathalyzers arrived in 1967, Britain trusted personal judgment over legal limits. People believed they could assess whether they were fit to drive, and many genuinely thought a small whiskey steadied the nerves. Was it safe? Statistically, no. Was it culturally accepted? Completely. The pub was the social living room of the nation. Neighbours met, strangers talked, and communities bonded nightly. Today, strict laws rightly protect lives, but that sense of communal gathering, the nightly ritual, has softened with time. Modern Britain is safer, but the social fabric of the local pub, once woven tightly through everyday life, has loosened. Fem. Lead paint bright colours, hidden dangers. Walk into a child's bedroom in 1960 seconds Britain, and you'd likely be greeted by colours so bold they almost hummed. Glossy reds on toy trains, sunshine yellows on rocking horses, deep blues on wooden blocks, and cheerful murals painted lovingly on nursery walls. Everything gleamed with a finish so smooth it felt almost glass-like. The secret behind it? Lead paint. Back then, nobody worried about toxicity. Parents chose colours for beauty, not safety labels. Manufacturers loved lead paint because it lasted forever, it didn't fade, crack or peel. Toys stayed bright for years. High chairs, cots, toy boxes, and even prams were coated in thick, durable layers that could survive any toddler's chaotic enthusiasm. It made childhood look colourful, cheerful, and wonderfully sturdy. Years later, of course, the science caught up. Lead dust, chipped flecks, and constant exposure created real health dangers for growing children. Removing it today requires professionals wearing masks and meticulous safety protocols. Modern paints are far safer, but often far more fragile. They chip, fade, and never quite replicate that unmistakable, glossy permanence of the 1960 seconds. Once again, safety won, but some of the charm and craftsmanship of the past quietly disappeared. C. Self-sufficiency, the backyard bonfire. The 1960 seconds back garden held many things: a washing line dancing in the breeze, a vegetable patch that families depended on, and, in many homes, a small metal incinerator or a simple bonfire pit. Burning rubbish wasn't a rebellious act, it was ordinary housekeeping. Families took responsibility for their own waste. Old newspapers, broken branches, worn-out cardboard, and bits of household rubbish were all burned safely at the end of the garden. It was efficient, practical, and part of weekly life. But it was also a social moment. Neighbours gathered as smoke curled into the evening air. Children, wrapped in jumpers, warmed their hands near the flames, roasting potatoes in the embers, or toasting bread on long sticks. Sparks flew into the night like tiny fireflies. Stories were shared, advice was offered, laughter drifted across hedges and fences. Children learned how to light a fire safely, how to tend it, how to manage risk. These weren't lessons from a book, they were real, hands-on experiences that built skill and confidence. Today, environmental regulations rightly protect air quality. But with the ban came the loss of this simple ritual. The warmth of neighbours gathered around a glowing fire, the pride of practical knowledge, and the gentle rhythm of self-sufficient living. 3. Unfiltered entertainment, a different kind of media. Television in the 1960 seconds felt wonderfully honest. Brands advertised everything openly: cigarettes, alcohol, sugary treats, even household chemicals, all delivered with catchy jingles and delightfully animated characters. No warnings, no disclaimers, no fear of offending or being banned. Children absorbed these adverts as part of the shared cultural experience. Families could quote them word for word. A slogan from a 1960 seconds TV commercial could travel through entire schools by the next morning. It wasn't considered dangerous, it was considered normal. The pub and smoking culture built around these industries created real community investment. Breweries sponsored football teams. Tobacco companies supported local events, charity drives, and national sports. Adverts were bold, playful, and often surprisingly creative. Today's regulated world is safer, no doubt about it. Smoking has fallen dramatically. Alcohol adverts are policed. Children's programming is carefully curated. And still, many people remember those old adverts with deep affection, not because of the products, but because of the era they represented. An era where media was confident, expressive, and trusted adults to make their own choices. We gained health. We lost a certain kind of cultural vibrancy. 2. Hitchhiking trust between strangers. There was a time when the sight of a young person standing at the roadside with their thumb out wasn't alarming, it was part of life. Hitchhiking was not only normal, it was celebrated. Students hitchhiked home from university. Workers accepted lifts to reach job sites miles away. Adventurous teenagers travelled the entire length of Britain, even into Europe, relying solely on the kindness of strangers. Drivers enjoyed the company. Hitchhikers appreciated the lift. Conversations filled those journeys, stories about work, family, dreams, and the unpredictable turns of life. These fleeting human connections created a unique social fabric, woven from trust and generosity. A single lift might take you across a village, the next might take you across a country. People learned about lives far removed from their own. They saw landscapes they'd never seen before. They relied on empathy, patience, and instincts, all qualities that build resilience and understanding. Today, pedestrians are banned from motorways. Hitchhiking is rare. Trust between strangers is thinner, swallowed by caution and the fast pace of modern life. Safety has improved, yes, but the spirit of spontaneous adventure, and that easy belief that a stranger might help you just because, has nearly vanished from British roads. 1. Clear roles and defined structures. Schools in 1960 seconds. Britain were deeply structured places, built around clear expectations and well-defined roles. Boys studied metalwork, woodwork, mechanics, and technical drawing, preparing them for practical trades. Girls learnt cooking, sewing, childcare, and domestic science skills considered essential for running a household. Looking back, the system feels rigid, even limiting. But for many who lived it, there was comfort in its clarity. Single-sex classrooms created environments where friendships were strong, competitions were fair, and pressures were reduced. Girls didn't feel judged by boys while learning domestic skills. Boys weren't embarrassed while learning technical ones. Everyone understood what their schooling was preparing them for. Life felt organised, predictable, secure. Modern Britain, guided by the Equality Act 2010, offers far more freedom. Careers are open to all. Education is universal. Opportunities are vastly expanded, and rightly so. But in gaining possibility, we lost the sturdy sense of certainty that came from knowing exactly what society expected of you. For better and for worse, the world changed, and so did its structures. Conclusion: the trade-offs of progress. 10 freedoms that shaped 1960 seconds Britain. 10 everyday experiences that feel almost impossible now. The people who lived through that era weren't reckless. They simply valued things differently. Freedom over safety, trust over supervision, independence over regulation, community over isolation. Modern Britain is safer, healthier, more equal, and more informed. Yet when we look back, we can still feel the tug of something we traded away, not because it was better, but because it was different. Community friendships that formed naturally, childhoods shaped by independence, adventures sparked by trust in strangers, scientific curiosity unfiltered by fear, pubs that felt like second homes. Progress isn't a clean line upward, it's a balancing act, a negotiation, a series of decisions about what matters most. And while we've gained so much, the memories of those freedoms linger warmly in the hearts of those who lived them. If you enjoyed this nostalgic journey through Britain's past, I'd love to have you with us for the next one. Please consider subscribing to British History, where we keep these memories alive and share the stories that shaped our nation. Let me know in the comments. Which of these everyday freedoms do you remember most? And which one do you wish Britain still had today?